Hey everyone, and welcome back to Technology Now, a weekly show from Hewlett Packard Enterprise where we take what's happening in the world and explore how it's changing the way organizations are using technology. We're your hosts, Aubrey Lovell.
And Michael Bird. And Aubrey, you are back.
That's right. I'm back in the hot seat and it feels really good. I've missed you all.
Yeah, and a huge thanks to Alicia for stepping in whilst you've been off. So yeah, amazing work, Alicia.
Absolutely.
Yeah, well, in this episode, we are looking at the new era of cybersecurity, where the emphasis is on building resilience against breaches rather than preventing attacks altogether. It's a follow-on from our last episode looking at the cybersecurity outlook in 2024 and beyond, where we talked a little about zero trust and secure access service edge, or SASE. The chance of ransomware successfully entering your network is higher than ever. That's why this new approach instead focuses on containing the damage even if a breach happens. So what role do users play in this new era of cybersecurity? What does minimizing attack surfaces look like when your network is spread out over hundreds of locations? And does zero trust really mean trusting no one?
Well, as you know, if you're the kind of person who needs to know why what's going on in the world matters to your organization, this podcast is for you. And if you haven't yet, subscribe to your podcast app of choice so you don't miss out. All right, Michael, let's get into it.
Let's do it.
All righty. So, according to Statista, over 72% of businesses worldwide were affected by ransomware attacks in 2023, a notable increase over the last 5 years. And we've linked to that report in the show notes. Now, industries across the board were hit, including finance, retail, healthcare, and more, according to a report by KPMG. You can find the sources in the show notes.
So this really is a concern for everyone, whether you keep your money at a bank, purchase your produce at a large grocery chain, or went to see a doctor at a walk-in clinic recently. And cybercriminals have gotten a lot faster at deploying ransomware after the initial breach. In 2023, that gap was an average of 5 days. But as we explored in the last episode, that's now down to a matter of hours.
So really, the threat landscape is truly changing at an astounding rate. So that's all the more reason for organizations to take an honest analytical look at their cybersecurity strategies.
So to find out more, I've been speaking once again to John Spiegel and Jaye Tillson. They are both field CTOs and distinguished technologists at HPE. Can I talk about zero trust? John, very briefly, can you just give us a quick definition?
So traditional security strategy in the past was all about the castle and moat. So if you think about, castles of the past, you build big walls, you put everything that's valuable behind those big walls, you set up your defenses so those walls don't get breached. That worked for a period of time, and then we saw the evolution of cloud, we saw the evolution of distributed enterprise. In 2020, workers left the corporate four walls and now are working from virtually anywhere in the world if they so desire. Those castle walls no longer are the mechanism we need. So there were some researchers that started to think about this problem and realized the challenge was really about these relationships that were trust relationships that were fine to exist within, a secure data center that, all your applications and all your data was there and you protected it with a firewall. Once you've gone beyond that, these trust relationships could be compromised rather easily. And so they came out with this concept called zero trust. It was in 2012. No Chewy Centers is the document out there. It's available out on the internet. It's a good read. The concept was, hey, our data now exists outside these walls. We need to assume that we need to protect it and essentially build what we call protect surfaces. Instead of building massive firewalls, build small little walls, containerize it. Think of it like the Titanic, go beyond the movie and think about the engineering that went into that ship. The new strategy is to build those watertight compartments such that if one section floods, it doesn't flood into the rest of the enterprise. And that, at the end of the day, is what zero trust is fundamentally about.
So, Jaye, maybe you can answer this one. How do you square that need for security against the need for efficient operation, like things being easy? Because presumably, to John's point, if everything is segmented, surely just like re-authenticating all the time just to go and access the things that you need. Is there a tipping point where it becomes so annoying that users try and figure out ways to circumvent it?
That's a good question, and users are always trying to circumvent anything that gets in their way. The key thing is to continue to make it simple. We haven't. If we look at the fact that probably 85% of organizations are still living in that castle and moat design, even though our data and our users, and we've got IoT and attack surfaces grown and grown and grown, it's really about reducing the number of vendors we have in play. It's really about keeping it simple and making sure that access doesn't change. So Zero Trust is really all about giving the access that is required to do your job and nothing more than that. It's not about removing access. It's not about taking away things that you need to do on a daily basis. It's just making sure that you have the exact access you need. And yes, that can be not always easy, but there are tools available that can help you on that journey to do that. So it's really about simplification and reducing complexity. Zero Trust doesn't have to be done in one go. It's not something that you will approach and finish in a short period of time. Those attack surfaces and those protection domains are really all around taking step-by-step approaches to this. Looking at what are your crown jewels, look at what are your highest risks, and look at it from a business perspective so that you can step-by-step wrap protection around those services, but maintain that level of access that your users require. So this, when done properly, shouldn't be disruptive. It is a cultural change and it is a shift, and people need to communicate and be educated what it means, because I think the term Zero Trust does imply quite a dramatic change, and not trusting is maybe an uncomfortable discussion to have, but it's not about making it zero. It's about giving just that level of access that you need.
Let's move on then. So, Jaye, can we talk about SSE? It's a new field in the world of cybersecurity. Can you just give a quick definition why we should be talking about it?
Okay, so SSE is Security Service Edge. It's part of the wider SASE architecture, and together they bring networking and security together. So you've got SSE as part of SASE, and now there's this new term being coined called Universal ZTNA, which is really including on-prem services or on-prem activity and on-prem users into the SASE architecture. The SASE architecture was really invented at a time, or coined at a time, when we were in the pandemic and everyone was really remote, and it misses that on-prem element. And now that we live in a hybrid world where users and data and devices can be everywhere, depending, like they can be in an office or at home or on the road, it's giving visibility and control across the whole of an architecture, a whole of an enterprise, with that kind of single policy is the key thing. That is really the game changer. That is really having visibility across everything from everywhere and control in a single policy.
What does that really, realistically mean to the end user?
From the end user's perspective, it's about user experience. It's about, we'll all be familiar that if we work at home certain days of the week, we have to do things in a certain way. We have to turn a VPN on or turn a VPN off, or to access certain things, we may need different VPNs and different levels of access depending on whether you're at home or in an office. When you come in an office, things are different again. It's very complicated and complex for a user to understand how and when to do things. Universal ZTNA means that you will have the same level of access using the same tools no matter where you are. It's really about simplification. It doesn't matter whether you're in a hotel, whether you're at home, whether you come in an office, you log on, you have that access you need, and we have the control from an IT and security perspective and that visibility.
Yeah, I think Jaye calls it out right there. Complexity is the friend of the bad guy. If you think about solutions that we deployed in the past, the number of vendors that we leverage just within the networking space, you could have vendor A, do your local area network, another vendor for your wide area network, so on and so forth, and then you get into the security space. And the average Fortune 500 company has upwards of 70, 80 different discrete security tools. And honestly, half of them are halfway deployed, so they're only leveraging maybe half of those tools. There's a lot of complexity within IT. And really what SASE looks to do is decomplexify that environment. So essentially decompose them of, their previous point products that might be hardware based, turn them into software, and then remove them from the data center and place them out on the edge of the network, closest to where that employee may be working, whether they're in a cafe or at home or even in the office, such that you can now deploy an application with both performance and security. Because in the past, that was difficult to do because you had to route that traffic back to that security stack.
We've previously talked about dwell time, okay? So when you have, let's say, 80 products in play, there's gray areas. There's areas where the attackers can hide between those products. And therefore, that dwell time can be significant, as we've talked about. When you start to reduce the number of products in play, you therefore reduce the number of gaps. Therefore, you are forcing people to find more places to hide, and therefore that dwell time naturally comes down. So because you're reducing the complexity, because you're reducing the number of point products in play, you are closing those gaps and reducing dwell time. And that's really what SASE and what Universal ZTNA are doing. They are unifying, reducing complexity, having less vendors in play, therefore reducing the number of places for attackers to hide and reducing that dwell time.
Thanks, John and Jaye. It's been absolutely wonderful to hear from you, and thanks for your time.
Right, well, now it is time for Today I Learned, the part of the show where we take a look at something happening in the world that we think you should know about. So, Aubrey, what do we have today?
So today we are looking at an incredibly powerful laser that could transform the future of human exploration in space. The Deep Space Optical Communications team at NASA announced it has successfully sent a laser signal 290 million miles away.
Whoa.
That's, I believe, 460 million kilometers. It's kind of hard to wrap your head around what that distance looks like, but maybe this will help. 290 million miles is roughly the distance between Earth and Mars. So
wow.
Pretty significant.
Yeah.
This laser signal from NASA was received by the Psyche spacecraft, which launched in October of 2023. Now, its main mission is to study an asteroid, but NASA is also using it to test its laser communication technology. Smart. So what does all this mean? Well, this takes NASA one step closer to sending a crewed mission to Mars. Essentially, laser communication would allow humans on Mars and Earth to transmit large amounts of information back and forth, relatively quickly as well. And that's the key here, the speed. Because today, NASA still communicates with its astronauts in the International Space Station using radio frequencies. But that's a slow method for transferring data. Lasers are up to 100 times faster. So if there were humans on Mars, laser communication would be the way to go. It's just really amazing.
Yeah, wow. Yeah, thank you for that, Aubrey.
Okay, now it's time to return to our guests, John Spiegel and Jaye Tillson, to talk about cybersecurity.
So taking all the stuff that we've just talked about, what would an ideal cybersecurity framework look like for an enterprise level organization?
My honest opinion is maybe not full zero trust, but at least a subset of zero trust that applies to your organization. I think it's the same with any architecture. It's not always going to be one size fits all. But zero trust is definitely a good place to start, and it's a place that we are seeing people start. It's definitely way more prevalent in regulations. John mentioned some of those, but you've also got NIS2 and Cyber Essentials Plus and all of these other regulations that are mandating some form of zero trust. So I think that's a good place to start and evaluate it and certainly apply it to your organization.
What I'm seeing is more conversations. Zero trust is certainly part of this. SSE, SASE are fitting within this realm, but a conversation on cyber resiliency. Because a lot of times in the past, it was about protecting systems. It was about, getting rid of the attacker. But we need to kind of move beyond that. If you think about A tire on a car is great until you hit the nail, and then, the nail punctures it, you lose air, and then, you've got to get out of the car, replace it with the spare. That takes a lot of time. What companies are starting to look to is this run flat tire concept, where even if it hits the nail, you can go 50 miles till you hit the gas station, so you don't have to get out of the car and replace the tire. We're seeing more conversations around this concept called cyber resiliency, and really what it focuses on is preventative, detective, and reactive controls. What happens after a breach? How do we recover in a rapid manner? And starting to bring in some of the other areas of the business, the backup and recover. What do the backups look like? What does business continuity look like? What is your DR strategy? So starting to take a more holistic approach to cybersecurity. And I think that's, once we kind of start to move forward, that's the area that I'm seeing a lot more conversation on, and leaders starting to think about, because breaches, they're going to happen. I mean, it's how you react to that first punch and how you recover from it that I think businesses are more interested in.
All right, final question from me then. Why should organizations be paying attention to the way that we architect our security? Why should they care?
It's a valid question. I mean, some organizations actually don't care. And I've met with people recently where they're just like, we can't get budget, we can't get help. But there's many reasons. I mean, fundamentally, businesses run on data and those crown jewels, and you need to protect that. You need to keep it safe. Whether that is leaked and people use it to create a competitive or conflicting product, whether it's a ransom that you get held under, whatever it may be, whether it's reputational damage. And each business is different. We've seen businesses recently be compromised, be in the news, their share prices drop. In theory, there's been reputational damage, and then suddenly their share price is back where it started. So actually, maybe they don't care if they get compromised. I think the key thing, and John's mentioned this before, is countries are now going to start fining you if you lose or get compromised, lose data or get compromised, or any of those things. So if you're not really bothered about the other things that may or may not happen, you're going to get fined. So if you are a leader within an organization and you don't care about all the other things, profit drives businesses. And if you're going to have to start paying those fines, you should sit up and take note.
Yeah, I would take a little different approach on this. If you do your security right, and you put in the right strategy, tools that balance both the need for risk and employee productivity, that gives you a competitive advantage. You build a system that's more resilient, can take a hit and keep going, that run flat concept. You're going to outwork and outperform your competition. It makes you more effective. You're not having to deal with outages. You're not having to deal with inefficiencies. I think that's, to me, the reason, but it has to be a balanced approach.
Wonderful. Thank you so much, Michael, for bringing us that interview. And to John and Jaye, thanks so much. It's been great to hear from you. And you can find more on the topics discussed in today's episode in our show notes. All right, well, we're getting towards the end of the show, which means it's time for This Week in History, a look at monumental events in the world of business and technology, which has changed our lives. Michael, over to you.
Oh, thank you, Aubrey. Well, the clue last week was it's 1952, and this computer gets our vote. It feels very topical. Aubrey, did you get it?
No, I did not. What is it?
Well, it was, of course, the first ever computerized prediction of an election outcome in the US. As part of a publicity stunt to popularize the computer as an analytical tool for business, it was decided to hold a live televised session in which a computer would predict the final election outcome between Dwight Eisenhower and Adlai Stevenson. Because the pre-election polls had the election very close, the publicity surrounding a computer predicting the winner generated a lot of popular interest. In fact, on the night, it was almost too accurate. The broadcaster and computer manufacturer saw that just after 3 million votes had been entered, the machine was skewing far away from the pre-election opinion polls. Fearing it was all going wrong, they quietly stopped referring to the computer until later in the evening, when, amazingly, they found it had not only gotten the result right, but the machine was within 3.5% of the actual popular vote, an Eisenhower landslide. That's a pretty cool story. Aubrey, what was the clue for next week?
Okay, so the clue is for next week, it's 1991, and we all came together for this explosive discovery. Can you guess what it is?
No, absolutely not. Most of the time, Aubrey, I'm not able to guess it. Whoever writes these is far smarter than me. And I'm okay with that. I'm okay with that.
Exactly. All right. Well, that brings us to the end of Technology Now for this week. Thank you so much to our guests, John Spiegel and Jaye Tillson, field CTOs and distinguished technologists at HP Aruba Networking. And to you, our listeners, as always, thank you so much for joining us.
Technology Now is hosted by Aubrey Lovell and myself, Michael Bird. And this episode was produced by Sam Datapaulin with production support from Harry Morton, Zoe Anderson, Alicia Kempson-Taylor, Alison Paisley, Alyssa Mitri, Camilla Patel, and Wan Yi Lee.
Our social editorial team is Rebecca Wissinger, Judy Ann Goldman, Katie Guarino, and our social media designers are Alejandra Garcia, Carlos Alberto Suarez, and Ambar Maldonado.
Technology Now is a Lower Street production for Hewlett Packard Enterprise, and we'll see you at the same time, the same place next week. Cheers.